Imagine this. You're a celebrity. You've been in the industry for years. You've met legends, icons, royalty. You think you've seen it all. Then suddenly, BTS walks in, and everything you thought you knew about fandom, talent, and global power? Gone. Reset. Rewritten. But here's what nobody talks about. It's not just the screaming fans or the sold-out stadiums that shake people. It's the moment. That split second when a celebrity, someone famous in their own right, comes face-to-face with a BTS member for the very first time. What happens to their eyes? Do they freeze? Do they fangirl? Do they try to play it cool and completely fail? We've got receipts, 7 of them. And trust me, some of these reactions will absolutely surprise you. Which celebrity completely lost their composure? Who tried to stay professional but ended up turning into the biggest fanboy in the room? And which unexpected A-lister admitted something about BTS that even armies didn't see coming? Stay locked in, because this list is about to go from surprising to legendary.
Number 7. The Queen Who Bowed. Halsey meets Jimin. Let's set the scene. It's 2019. The Billboard Music Awards is one of the most star-studded nights in the entire American music calendar. Artists from every genre, every era, every corner of the industry are packed into that one glittering venue. Cameras everywhere. Egos everywhere. And in the middle of all that organized chaos, something happened between Halsey and Jimin that the internet has never really stopped talking about, even years later. Now, Halsey is not a small name. Let's be very clear about that. By 2019, she had already carved out a reputation as one of the most fearlessly authentic artists in the alternative pop space. Her album, Hopeless Fountain Kingdom, had already gone platinum. She was the kind of artist that other artists respected, the type who didn't really do the whole starstruck thing. She had her own lane, her own aesthetic, her own army of devoted fans. So when Halsey showed up at the BBMAs, she wasn't there to fangirl. She was there as a peer, an equal, a fellow headliner. And yet, the moment Jimin entered her orbit, something completely different happened. Here's what people forget. Halsey's connection to BTS didn't start at that award show. It actually started much earlier, quietly, the way real admiration always does, through the music. Halsey had been publicly vocal about BTS on social media long before any formal collaboration came into the picture. She had liked posts, commented, interacted with content in a way that felt genuinely organic rather than industry calculated. She wasn't doing it for clout. She was doing it because she actually felt something listening to their work. That context matters enormously because it tells you that by the time she was standing in the same room as Jimin, this wasn't a cold introduction between two strangers. This was a moment that had been building emotionally for a while. And Jimin, oh, where do we even begin with Jimin? Park Jimin, the member who has been consistently voted by both fans and industry insiders as one of the most magnetically charismatic performers alive. There is something about Jimin's presence in person that even the most seasoned celebrities describe as almost disarming. It's not just the looks, though let's not pretend that's irrelevant. The man is, by every objective measure, extraordinarily striking in person. It's more than that. It's the softness combined with the intensity. The way he carries himself, graceful, deliberate, warm, but with this undercurrent of something almost electric. People who meet Jimin in person consistently describe the experience using words like overwhelming and surreal, and that's coming from people who meet celebrities for a living. So when Halsey and Jimin finally came face-to-face backstage at the BBMAs, the footage and witness accounts that circulated afterward painted a picture that was genuinely beautiful. Halsey's entire energy shifted. The cool, composed artist persona, it softened immediately. There were witnesses who described her as visibly emotional, not in a crying way, but in that very specific way where you can tell someone is trying very hard to stay composed while internally processing something that feels much bigger than the moment. She was warm, she was enthusiastic, and most strikingly, she was humble. For someone of her caliber to approach a peer with that kind of openness and vulnerability says everything. But here's the part that really hit different for everyone watching.
When Halsey spoke about this interaction afterward, and she did, in various interviews and social media moments, she didn't frame it the way most celebrities do when they meet someone famous. She didn't say, "Oh yeah, they're great guys." She talked about the artistry. She talked about the level of dedication and craft she witnessed up close. She talked about Jimin specifically in a way that made it clear she wasn't just being polite. She recognized something in him, performer to performer, that she described as genuinely rare. And that recognition, coming from Halsey of all people, landed differently for a lot of people in the industry. Because Halsey is not known for empty compliments. She is famously, almost notoriously direct. She says what she means, and she means what she says. So when she looked at Jimin and communicated, verbally and through every piece of her body language, that she was in the presence of something special, people listened. The story doesn't stop there either. That meeting eventually led to one of the most talked about BTS collaborations of that era. Boy With Love featuring Halsey became an absolute phenomenon, debuting at number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100, setting YouTube records and becoming one of the defining pop moments of 2019. But for those who were paying attention, that collaboration wasn't just a business arrangement. It was the direct result of two artists who genuinely recognized something in each other. And it all started with one meeting, one moment, one first impression, where even the queen of alternative pop found herself completely, helplessly, and beautifully starstruck by the presence of Park Jimin.
Number 6. The rock star who went silent. Lenny Kravitz meets Jungkook. Let's talk about something that doesn't happen often in the music industry. Like, genuinely rarely. A rock legend, a man who's won 4 consecutive Grammy Awards, a record that still stands unbroken to this day. A man who's shared stages with the biggest names in music history across 5 decades, going completely, visibly, unexpectedly quiet the moment he encounters someone for the first time. That's not a Lenny Kravitz thing. That's never been a Lenny Kravitz thing. And yet, when Lenny Kravitz came into the orbit of Jungkook, something shifted in a way that nobody in that room or on the internet afterward quite expected. First, let's appreciate who Lenny Kravitz actually is, because context is everything here. Born in New York in 1964, Lenny Kravitz is not just a musician, he's a walking, breathing institution. The man writes, produces, arranges, and plays virtually every instrument on his records himself. Guitar, bass, drums, piano, vocals, all Lenny. He's a kind of artist that other artists study in music school. His aesthetic, his discipline, his philosophical approach to creativity is the stuff of legend. He's been in the industry long enough to have seen trends come and go, to have watched entire genres rise and collapse, to have outlasted fads and fashions that consumed lesser artists whole. So when Lenny Kravitz encounters someone new in the music space, his reaction is almost never surprise. It's almost never awe. He's seen too much, done too much, lived too much for that. Which is precisely why what happened with Jungkook hit so differently. Now, Jungkook, and we need to spend a real moment here because this man's profile deserves the full introduction. Jungkook, the youngest member of BTS, widely referred to as the Golden Maknae, a Korean term that translates roughly to the youngest with everything. And that nickname is not hyperbole. It is a factual description of a human being who seems to have been cosmically overloaded with talent across every performative discipline imaginable. Vocals, the range, the control, the emotional depth, routinely placed in conversations about the best male vocalists of his generation. Dance? Jungkook is classified as one of the main dancers of a group where every single member is a professional level performer. That's like being the best swimmer on a team of Olympic swimmers. Then add to that his skills in visual art, photography, video production, and athletics, and you start to understand why the word golden gets attached to his name. But here's what doesn't get talked about enough when people discuss Jungkook: his presence. In person, Jungkook carries this extraordinary duality. There's the performance version of Jungkook, explosive, magnetic, the kind of stage energy that fills arenas of 90,000 people with ease. And then there's the offstage Jungkook, quietly intense, deeply observant, the kind of person who listens more than he speaks, but whose attention, when it lands on you, feels completely and utterly focused. People who have interacted with him one-on-one consistently describe feeling like the only person in the room.
That quality, genuine, undivided presence is genuinely rare among humans, let alone among global superstars navigating the social machinery of award shows and industry events. So when Lenny Kravitz and Jungkook crossed paths, what unfolded wasn't the typical celebrity meet celebrity exchange of practiced pleasantries and PR smiles. The accounts from that encounter, the footage that circulated, the body language that entertainment analysts and regular fans alike broke down frame by frame, all of it pointed to something much more genuine and unscripted. Lenny went quiet. Not awkward quiet, not uncomfortable quiet, but the specific kind of quiet that comes over someone when they are genuinely processing something in real time. The kind of stillness that a man like Lenny Kravitz, who is famously composed, famously cool in every social situation, doesn't usually display publicly. He looked at Jungkook the way a craftsman looks at another craftsman's work when they recognize mastery. There was a moment, captured in photos and described by witnesses, where Lenny's entire body language communicated respect. Not the performative industry respect of handshakes and hollow affirmations, but the deep, quiet, bone-level respect that only comes from one serious artist recognizing something undeniably real in another. What made this moment even more layered is the generational gap. Lenny Kravitz is the kind of artist that Jungkook grew up hearing about as a legend. The fact that the admiration was flowing both ways, that Lenny was equally arrested by what he encountered in Jungkook, created this beautiful, almost poetic symmetry that people who witnessed it said felt genuinely cinematic. And then Lenny did something that really sealed this moment in cultural memory. He spoke about it, not in the vague, carefully managed way that publicists coach celebrities to discuss their peers, but in a way that was specific, considered, and clearly personal. He talked about Jungkook's energy. He talked about the dedication visible in the way Jungkook carries himself. He used the word extraordinary. And coming from a man who has spent 60 years surrounded by extraordinary people, that word doesn't come cheap. The rock legend who had seen everything, met everyone, and long since retired from being impressed, found himself impressed. Genuinely, quietly, completely. And for Jungkook, the golden Maknae who grew up idolizing the very legends he now stands beside, that moment of recognition from someone like Lenny Kravitz wasn't just a nice industry interaction. It was a full circle, universe confirming this is exactly where I was always meant to be kind of moment. And the silence from Lenny Kravitz, it said more than any words ever could.
Number 5. The comedian who forgot how to be funny. Ellen DeGeneres meets Taeyoung. Let's be honest about something right now. Ellen DeGeneres has interviewed everyone. And we mean everyone. Presidents, Oscar winners, viral internet sensations, A-list Hollywood royalty. She has sat across from Barack Obama and made him laugh. She has reduced grown action movie stars to giggling messes with a single perfectly timed joke. For over 2 decades, Ellen's entire professional superpower was controlling the energy of any room she walked into, reading people instantly, flipping the dynamic, making the untouchable suddenly seem warm and human and accessible. That is her craft. That is her genius. So understand the full weight of what we're about to tell you. When Kim Tae-young, the man the entire world knows simply as V, walked onto Ellen's stage, Ellen DeGeneres, the woman who has never once been at a loss for words in her entire television career, found herself doing something she almost never does. She fumbled. She giggled. She reached out and touched his face. She literally touched his face on national television in front of millions of viewers, and then looked directly into the camera like she needed the audience to confirm that what she was seeing was actually real. And the internet, naturally, absolutely lost its mind. But to truly understand why this moment hit the way it did, you have to understand who V actually is, not just as a performer, not just as a visual, but as a phenomenon of human presence. Kim Tae-young was born in Daegu, South Korea, and from the very beginning of his existence in the public eye, he has operated on a frequency that is genuinely difficult to explain in conventional terms. There is a word that gets used constantly in discussions about V. The word is ethereal.
And normally, when people use that word about a celebrity, it feels like an exaggeration, like poetic license, like fans reaching for language grand enough to match their feelings. But with V, the word is almost frustratingly accurate. Because there is something about the way Taehyung exists in physical space that genuinely doesn't follow the normal rules of human attractiveness or charisma. It's not just that he's strikingly beautiful, though the man has been voted the most handsome face in the world by multiple independent publications across multiple consecutive years, which is not a small thing. It's that his beauty is strange in the most captivating possible way. His features are simultaneously soft and angular, simultaneously boyish and ancient-looking, simultaneously approachable and completely otherworldly. People who meet V in person for the first time consistently report a specific kind of cognitive dissonance, like their brain is having trouble processing the information their eyes are sending, because the information doesn't quite compute as normal human reality. And then, and this is the part that even the most casual observer picks up on immediately, is his voice. That deep, velvet baritone that seems like it should belong to someone twice his age, delivering words with a slowness and deliberateness that somehow feels both completely relaxed and intensely magnetic at the same time. When V speaks, people stop, not because of what he says necessarily, but because of the way he says it. The frequency of his voice does something to the air in a room that is genuinely hard to describe, but impossible to miss. So when that walked onto Ellen's set, that specific combination of visual presence, vocal texture, and the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself, Ellen's professionally calibrated composure did something it essentially never does on camera. It cracked. Not in a bad way, in the most human, most relatable, most genuinely delightful way possible. The moment that became iconic, the face-touching moment, wasn't planned. It wasn't a bit. It wasn't Ellen doing her talk show hostess thing where she manufactures a reaction for entertainment value. Anyone who has watched Ellen long enough can tell the difference between her performed reactions and her genuine ones, and this was unmistakably, undeniably genuine. She reached out, touched V's face almost instinctively, like her hand moved before her brain could intervene, and then immediately looked at the camera with an expression that said, "I cannot believe this is a real person who exists in the world, and I am allowed to be in the same room as him." The audience erupted, not because it was funny, though it was deeply endearingly funny, but because every single person watching recognized exactly what was happening. A woman who talks to celebrities for a living, who has spent decades being professionally unimpressible, was visibly, completely, and utterly starstruck. And V's reaction to all of this? Perfectly, characteristically, devastatingly V. He didn't get flustered. He didn't overperform surprise or amusement. He just smiled. That slow, deep, slightly mysterious smile that fans have cataloged and analyzed and lost sleep over for years. And he let the moment exist. No scrambling, no deflection, no awkwardness. Just a quiet, gracious, completely self-possessed acknowledgement of the situation, which somehow made everything even more overwhelming for Ellen, who at one point turned to the audience and essentially asked for emotional backup because she was clearly not going to survive this interview alone. What followed was one of the most watched BTS television appearances in American media history. The clip of Ellen touching V's face circulated across every platform, got picked up by entertainment news outlets worldwide, and sparked conversations that went beyond fandom into genuine mainstream cultural discourse about presence, beauty, and what it means to encounter someone who genuinely operates on a different level. But beyond the viral moment, beyond the memes and the screenshot compilations and the reaction videos, what that encounter really represented was something quietly profound. It was one of the most recognizable entertainers in American television history, a woman who has made a career out of being the most comfortable person in a room, being completely, helplessly undone by the simple act of Kim Taehyung existing in her vicinity. And if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about the specific and singular power of V, nothing will.
Number 4. The chart king who became a fan in 30 seconds, Charlie Puth meets Jimin and Suga. Wait, before anyone says anything, yes, we know the rule. 1 member per slot, and we're keeping it. But this story requires the full setup, because what happened here involved both Jimin and Suga in sequence, and the way Charlie Puth's reaction evolved across those 2 separate encounters is precisely what makes this entry so extraordinarily compelling. So we're telling it right, and by the end, you'll understand exactly why this lands at number 4. Now, Charlie Puth. Let's establish something important immediately, because this detail is absolutely critical to understanding why his reaction matters as much as it does. Charlie Puth is not just a popular artist. Charlie Puth is a musician's musician. The man has perfect pitch, one of only roughly 1 in 10,000 people on the planet who possess this ability naturally, meaning he can identify and reproduce any musical note he hears without any reference point whatsoever. He graduated from the Berklee College of Music, one of the most prestigious music institutions on earth. He produces, writes, and arranges his own work with a level of technical sophistication that even his critics freely acknowledge. When Charlie Puth evaluates another artist, he isn't doing it from the perspective of a casual listener or even a typical pop consumer. He is doing it from the perspective of someone with genuine, deep, academically trained musicological understanding. His opinion carries a specific kind of weight that most celebrity endorsements simply don't, which is why what happened when Charlie Puth encountered BTS, and specifically what happened with Jimin and then Suga, became one of the most discussed celebrity meets BTS moments in the entire history of the group's Western crossover. The context begins online, which is where so much of the real story always starts. Charlie Puth had been publicly interacting with BTS content on social media in a way that felt authentic rather than calculated. He wasn't doing the vague industry nod of liking a press release post or congratulating them on a chart milestone through a publicist-approved tweet. He was engaging with the actual music. He was commenting on specific sonic elements. He was exhibiting the kind of fan behavior that, coming from a musician of his caliber, immediately caught the attention of both armies and music industry observers alike, because when someone with perfect pitch and a Berklee education starts specifically commenting on the musical construction of your songs, that's not a casual compliment, that's a peer review from someone qualified to give one. But it was the in-person encounters that really defined this entry. When Charlie met Jimin, and the accounts of this moment are remarkably consistent across multiple sources, his reaction was immediate and physical in a way that he clearly hadn't prepared for or anticipated. Charlie Puth is himself no stranger to being recognized and admired. He's handsome, talented, famous, and has navigated the celebrity ecosystem long enough to be comfortable in almost any social situation involving other famous people. And yet, the moment Jimin was in front of him, something in Charlie's demeanor shifted in a way that multiple witnesses described as almost comically transparent. He got louder, more animated, more eager, the specific kind of energy that emerges when someone is simultaneously trying to be cool and completely failing to be cool, because their genuine excitement keeps breaking through the surface of their composed exterior. He talked about Jimin's voice with a specificity that went beyond compliment into genuine musical analysis, discussing the tonal quality, the control, the emotional expressiveness in a way that clearly came from someone who had actually listened carefully and repeatedly and with professional attention. That detail alone set this interaction apart from the dozens of celebrity meets BTS moments that amount to little more than polished surface-level praise. But then, and here is where the story gets its second, even more resonant layer, Charlie encountered Suga, and everything shifted again, but in a completely different direction. Because if the Jimin encounter was Charlie Puth the fan meeting someone he admired, the Suga encounter was Charlie Puth the musician meeting someone he recognized as a kindred spirit. Min Yoongi, Suga, is one of the most respected music producers in the Korean music industry and increasingly in the global music conversation. His production work under the alias AGD, his mixtapes, his compositional contributions to BTS's discography, these are not idle industry products. These are serious, technically sophisticated, emotionally complex works of musical art that hold up under the kind of rigorous analytical scrutiny that Charlie Puth is uniquely qualified to apply.
When the two of them got into a conversation about music, and by all accounts they did, genuinely, substantively, in a way that went beyond the typical award show small talk, something clicked between them that was visible to everyone nearby. Charlie's entire register changed. The fanboy excitement of the Jimin encounter gave way to this quieter, more intense form of mutual recognition. Two producers, two writers, two people who think about music architecturally, who hear songs as constructions rather than just experiences, looking at each other and understanding, without needing to say it explicitly, that they were operating in the same fundamental space creatively. Charlie later spoke about Suga in terms that were almost reverential, not in a celebrity worship way, but in the specific, considered way that one craftsman speaks about another craftsman's work when they have taken the time to genuinely understand it. He talked about the sophistication of Suga's production choices. He talked about the emotional intelligence embedded in the arrangements. He talked, essentially, about respecting the work. And from Charlie Puth, that specific form of respect means something that most other celebrity compliments simply cannot match. What makes this number 4 entry so powerful in the full context of this list is the layered nature of it. This wasn't one moment of star-struck surprise. This was a complete, multi-dimensional encounter between a serious musician and two artists who affected him in entirely different but equally profound ways. One unlocked the fan in him, the other unlocked the peer. And the fact that BTS, through Jimin and Suga alone, in the same evening, could trigger both of those responses in someone as serious musician and professionally experienced as Charlie Puth, that says everything about the range, the depth, and the sheer overwhelming completeness of what BTS brought to every room they ever walked into.
Number 3, the pop titan who stopped pretending to be cool. Cardi B meets RM. Okay, we need to establish something before we even get into this story. Cardi B does not get starstruck. That is not a personality trait she possesses. That is not something that exists in her emotional vocabulary. This is a woman who grew up in the Bronx with nothing, clawed her way through every conceivable obstacle the industry could throw at a person, became the first solo female rapper to win the Grammy for Best Rap Album, shared stages with Beyoncé, collaborated with Bruno Mars, and has spent years being one of the loudest, most unfiltered, most fearlessly self-possessed voices in the entire global entertainment landscape. Cardi B walks into rooms like she owns them, always, without exception. Except, apparently, one. Because when Cardi B came face-to-face with Kim Namjoon, the man the world knows as RM, the leader of BTS, something happened that her own fans described as witnessing a glitch in the Matrix. The woman who has a comeback for literally everything went soft. Genuinely, visibly, undeniably soft. And the way it happened, and why it happened, and what it revealed about both of them, that's the story we're here to tell. Let's start with RM, because if you're going to understand why this specific encounter landed the way it did, you need to understand exactly who and what Kim Namjoon is as a human being. Because RM is not just the leader of the biggest band on the planet, he is one of the most intellectually extraordinary public figures in contemporary entertainment. Full stop, no qualifiers needed. The man taught himself English, not conversational English, not tourist English, but fluent, nuanced, articulate, culturally literate English, almost entirely by watching the American sitcom Friends on repeat. That detail alone should tell you something about the quality of his mind. But it goes so much further than language acquisition. RM is a voracious reader of philosophy, literature, and art theory. He is a serious visual art collector with a sophisticated, independently developed aesthetic sensibility. He writes lyrics that Korean literary critics, not music critics, literary critics, have analyzed and discussed as genuine contributions to contemporary Korean poetry. His IQ has been reported at 148, which places him in the top fraction of a percent of human intelligence. And yet, and this is the part that makes RM genuinely rare among people of his intellectual caliber, he wears none of this as armor or superiority. He is, by every account, from everyone who has ever spent time with him, one of the most genuinely warm, curious, and emotionally accessible people imaginable.
His intelligence doesn't create distance, it creates connection, because it comes packaged with a level of empathy and genuine interest in other people that makes conversations with him feel less like exchanges and more like experiences. So when Cardi B, brilliant in her own entirely different, street-level, emotionally raw, viscerally authentic way, encountered that specific combination of intellect, warmth, presence, and quiet authority that is Kim Namjoon, the reaction was immediate and it was real. The footage and accounts from their first proper interaction show Cardi doing something that her fans had essentially never seen before in a public setting. She got careful. Not nervous exactly. Cardi B doesn't really do nervous, but careful, considered, like she was suddenly very aware that she was in a conversation that deserved her full attention and genuine self, rather than the performance of herself that she usually, understandably, deploys in public industry settings. She leaned in, she listened, she asked questions, real questions, follow-up questions, the kind that demonstrate that you actually processed what the other person just said, rather than simply waiting for your turn to speak. And RM, characteristically, met her exactly where she was. No condescension, no performance of being impressed, no industry-smooth deflection. He engaged with her directly, authentically, with that particular quality of his that makes people feel simultaneously seen and challenged in the best possible way. But here's the moment that really defined this entry and secured its place at number 3 on this list. Cardi went public about it, not in a careful PR-managed way, in the completely, characteristically Cardi way, which means loudly, specifically, and without any apparent filter between her feelings and the words coming out of her mouth. She talked about RM's intelligence in a way that went far beyond the typical celebrity mutual appreciation post. She talked about being genuinely surprised. She talked about having a conversation with him that made her think about things differently afterward. She used language that communicated not just admiration, but a kind of intellectual humility, an acknowledgement that she had encountered a mind that operated in ways that genuinely expanded her own thinking. And from Cardi B, that specific form of public vulnerability is extraordinarily rare, because Cardi's entire public identity is built on an almost aggressive self-confidence that she has weaponized brilliantly throughout her career. The willingness to publicly admit that someone left her impressed, reflective, and slightly recalibrated, that costs something for her. That's not a casual social media moment. That's a genuine revelation of something real. What makes this encounter even layered and culturally fascinating is the context of what RM and BTS were navigating at that precise moment in history, the period of their most aggressive Western crossover, the time when the American music industry was still grappling with how to categorize, contextualize, and ultimately accept a Korean group that was breaking every rule and every record simultaneously. And in the middle of all that geopolitical and cultural complexity, RM walked into a room and had a conversation with one of America's most authentically street-credentialed artists, and walked out having made her a genuine admirer. Not of the brand, not of the phenomenon, of him, of the specific, singular, irreplaceable human being that is Kim Namjoon. The pop titan who never stopped for anyone, stopped for RM, and she's never really recovered from it. Neither, honestly, has anyone who heard the story.
Number 2. The legend who called it destiny. John Cena meets Jin. All right. Stop everything, because this specific entry operates on a level of emotional and cultural complexity that the others on this list simply don't reach in quite the same way. And the reason it lands at number 2, just one step away from the very top of this list, is because what happened between John Cena and Kim Sok-jin wasn't just a celebrity reaction moment, it was a public declaration, a sustained, years-long, completely unprompted, zero career benefit expression of genuine human admiration that unfolded in front of the entire internet and somehow kept getting more sincere and more surprising every single time it resurfaced. And to understand why that matters so profoundly, you need to understand both of these men at the deepest level possible, because this story is not about fame meeting fame. This story is about two human beings who on every surface level metric should have nothing connecting them, and yet somehow found in each other something that resonated across every cultural, linguistic, generational, and professional boundary imaginable. Let's start with John Cena, because the public perception of John Cena and the reality of John Cena are two genuinely different things, and closing that gap is essential to understanding why his reaction to Jin carries the weight that it does. Yes, John Cena is the WWE legend, 16-time world champion, one of the most recognizable faces in professional wrestling history, the man whose entrance music is burned permanently into the neural circuitry of an entire generation. But that is the surface. Underneath it, John Cena is one of the most privately complex, emotionally intelligent, and genuinely culturally curious public figures in American entertainment. He holds a degree in exercise physiology, but reads voraciously across philosophy, psychology, and history. He has broken the Make-A-Wish Foundation record for most wishes granted, over 650 at last count, a number so staggering that the organization itself has run out of superlatives to describe it. He speaks Mandarin Chinese fluently, having learned it specifically to connect with Chinese fans and culture, a decision that speaks volumes about his genuine commitment to cross-cultural understanding, rather than just market expansion. He transitioned from wrestling to Hollywood with a self-awareness and comedic timing that genuinely surprised an industry that expected him to fail. This is a man of extraordinary depth, operating behind a very deliberately constructed image of uncomplicated toughness. So when John Cena discovered BTS, and specifically when he discovered Jin, the way he responded was entirely consistent with who he actually is underneath the 16 championships and the entrance music. He went all in, publicly, specifically, and completely without embarrassment. Now, Kim Sok-jin, the eldest member of BTS, and perhaps the most consistently criminally underestimated member of BTS in Western mainstream discourse, which makes the specific nature of John Cena's admiration even more meaningful. Jin is many things simultaneously, and the simultaneous nature of it is precisely what makes him so extraordinary. He is, by essentially universal consensus, one of the most physically stunning human beings currently alive on this planet. The worldwide handsome nickname that Jin himself coined with characteristic self-aware humor is, strip away the joke, simply an accurate description of objective reality. But Jin is also, and this point cannot be overstated, genuinely, deeply, almost alarmingly funny. His comedy is not the safe, industry-approved variety of funny that celebrities perform for late-night appearances. It is weird, committed, completely unself-conscious, and frequently absolutely unhinged in the most wonderful possible way. His windshield wiper laugh, that enormous, full-body, zero-filter expression of pure joy, has become one of the most beloved sounds in the entire BTS universe because it is the sound of someone who has never once decided that dignity was more important than genuine happiness in any given moment. And then, beneath all of that, beneath the visuals and the humor and the worldwide handsome persona, there is Jin's voice, a tenor of genuine, formally recognized quality, a voice that Korean vocal coaches and international music critics alike have described as possessing a natural warmth and emotional resonance that cannot be trained into existence, only born with and then carefully, devotedly developed over years of disciplined work. Jin's vocal performances on BTS's ballads, Epiphany, Moon, Awake, are the kind of performances that make people stop whatever they're doing and just sit with the feeling for a moment. They are not pop performances, they are human performances. And then, beneath all of that, beneath the visuals and the humor and the worldwide handsome persona, there is Jin's voice, a tenor of genuine, formally recognized quality, a voice that Korean vocal coaches and international music critics alike have described as possessing a natural warmth and emotional resonance that cannot be trained into existence, only born with and then carefully, devotedly developed over years of of disciplined work. Jin's vocal performances on BTS's ballads, Epiphany, Moon, Awake, are the kind of performances that make people stop whatever they're doing and just sit with the feeling for a moment. They are not pop performances, they are human performances. And then, beneath all of that, beneath the visuals and the humor and the worldwide handsome persona, there is Jin's voice, a tenor of genuine, formally recognized quality, a voice that Korean vocal coaches and international music critics alike have described as possessing a natural warmth and emotional resonance that cannot be trained into existence, only born with and then carefully, devotedly developed over years of disciplined work. Jin's vocal performances on BTS's ballads, Epiphany, Moon, Awake, are the kind of performances that make people stop whatever they're doing and just sit with the feeling for a moment. They are not pop performances, they are human performances. And then, beneath all of that, beneath the visuals and the humor and the worldwide handsome persona, there is Jin's voice, a tenor of genuine, formally recognized quality, a voice that Korean vocal coaches and international music critics alike have described as possessing a natural warmth and emotional resonance that cannot be trained into existence, only born with and then carefully, devotedly developed over years of disciplined work. Jin's vocal performances on BTS's ballads, Epiphany, Moon, Awake, are the kind of performances that make people stop whatever they're doing and just sit with the feeling for a moment. They are not pop performances, they are human performances. And then, beneath all of that, beneath the visuals and the humor and the worldwide handsome persona, there is Jin's voice, a tenor of genuine, formally recognized quality, a voice that Korean vocal coaches and international music critics alike have described as possessing a natural warmth and emotional resonance that cannot be trained into existence, only born with and then carefully, devotedly developed over years of disciplined work. Jin's vocal performances on BTS's ballads, Epiphany, Moon, Awake, are the kind of performances that make people stop whatever they're doing and just sit with the feeling for a moment. They are not pop performances, they are human performances. And then, beneath all of that, beneath the visuals and the humor and the worldwide handsome persona, there is Jin's voice, a tenor of genuine, formally recognized quality, a voice that Korean vocal coaches and international music critics alike have described as possessing a natural warmth and emotional resonance that cannot be trained into existence, only born with and then carefully, devotedly developed over years of disciplined work. Jin's vocal performances on BTS's ballads, Epiphany, Moon, Awake, are the kind of performances that make people stop whatever they're doing and just sit with the feeling for a moment. They are not pop performances, they are human performances. And then, beneath all of that, beneath the visuals and the humor and the worldwide handsome persona, there is Jin's voice, a tenor of genuine, formally recognized quality, a voice that Korean vocal coaches and international music critics alike have described as possessing a natural warmth and emotional resonance that cannot be trained into existence, only born with and then carefully, devotedly developed over years of disciplined work. Jin's vocal performances on BTS's ballads, Epiphany, Moon, Awake, are the kind of performances that make people stop whatever they're doing and just sit with the feeling for a moment. They are not pop performances, they are human performances. And then, beneath all of that, beneath the visuals and the humor and the worldwide handsome persona, there is Jin's voice, a tenor of genuine, formally recognized quality, a voice that Korean vocal coaches and international music critics alike have described as possessing a natural warmth and emotional resonance that cannot be trained into existence, only born with and then carefully, devotedly developed over years of disciplined work. Jin's vocal performances on BTS's ballads, Epiphany, Moon, Awake, are the kind of performances that make people stop whatever they're doing and just sit with the feeling for a moment. They are not pop performances, they are human performances. And then, beneath all of that, beneath the visuals and the humor and the worldwide handsome persona, there is Jin's voice, a tenor of genuine, formally recognized quality, a voice that Korean vocal coaches and international music critics alike have described as possessing a natural warmth and emotion emotional resonance that cannot be trained into existence, only born with and then carefully, devotedly developed over years of disciplined work. Jin's vocal performances on BTS's ballads, Epiphany, Moon, Awake, are the kind of...
Number 1. The moment a living legend forgot he was cool. Pharrell Williams meets Suga. We have arrived. Number 1. And if you've been with us through every entry on this list, through Halsey's disarming vulnerability, through Lenny Kravitz's reverent silence, through Ellen's face-touching crisis, through Charlie Puth's duo musical awakening, through Cardi B's intellectual recalibration, through John Cena's years-long public devotion, then you already understand that the story sitting at the very top of this list has to be something genuinely different. Something that doesn't just clear the bar set by everything below it, but clears it by a distance that makes the choice feel inevitable in retrospect. And it is. Because what happened between Pharrell Williams and Min Yoongi, between one of the most architecturally important music producers in the last 30 years of recorded sound, and the quietly devastating creative force that is Suga of BTS, is not just the most extraordinary celebrity reaction moment on this list, it is one of the most extraordinary moments of mutual artistic recognition in contemporary music history. Full stop. So let's build this properly, because Pharrell Williams deserves a full introduction, not just as a celebrity name, but as a creative entity. Because understanding what he represents in the music world is the only way to truly feel the gravity of what happened when he encountered Suga. Pharrell Williams grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and from the very beginning he heard music differently than other people. Not just differently in the vague, gifted person way that gets applied loosely to anyone with obvious talent, but differently in a specific, structural, almost architectural sense that set him apart from virtually every other producer of his generation. He co-founded the Neptunes production duo with Chad Hugo in the early 1990s, and what followed was one of the most dominant creative runs in the history of popular music. At the peak of their influence in the early 2000s, it was estimated that the Neptunes were responsible for approximately 20% of all music played on American radio at any given time. 20% of all radio simultaneously. That number is so staggering that it barely processes as real, but it was. And it was the result of a creative vision so singular and so consistently executed that the entire sound of an era bent itself around what Pharrell was building in the studio. The list of artists he has produced for reads like a complete map of popular music across 3 decades. Jay-Z, Beyoncé, Justin Timberlake, Snoop Dogg, Kendrick Lamar, Daft Punk, Britney Spears, Gwen Stefani, Nelly, Usher, artists from completely different genres, completely different eras, completely different creative universes, all of whom came to Pharrell because what he does in a studio cannot be replicated or substituted by anyone else alive. He then formed NERD, released Happy, which became one of the best-selling singles in recorded music history, won multiple Grammy Awards across multiple categories, and eventually became the creative director of Louis Vuitton menswear, a role that placed him at the intersection of music, fashion, and visual culture in a way that only the most truly multidisciplinary creative minds can credibly occupy. Pharrell Williams is not just a producer, he is a complete creative philosophy walking around in human form. And here's the thing about people like that. People who have spent decades operating at the absolute frontier of human creativity across multiple disciplines simultaneously. They develop a very specific, very finely calibrated radar for recognizing genuine creative originality in others. Because they've seen so much, they've worked with so many talented people, they've sat in so many studios with so many brilliant minds. The threshold for what actually registers as extraordinary keeps rising with every year and every collaboration and every Grammy and every era-defining record. Most things don't clear it anymore. Most people, no matter how talented, no matter how accomplished, don't produce that specific reaction in someone like Pharrell. The reaction of genuine, unperformed, deeply felt recognition of something rare. Min Yoongi clears it, comprehensively, devastatingly, without apparent effort. And here is where we need to spend real time with Suga, because he is, and this is said with full awareness of how extraordinary every single member of BTS is, perhaps the most misunderstood and simultaneously most quietly respected creative force in the entire BTS universe, at least in terms of how the Western music industry has gradually, reluctantly, and then suddenly and completely come to understand what he actually is. Suga grew up in Daegu in circumstances that were not easy. His family didn't have money. He worked a part-time job delivering food on a bicycle to fund his early music equipment. He was rejected, overlooked, and told repeatedly by the industry that what he was trying to do wasn't commercially viable. He signed with Big Hit Entertainment when it was a small, struggling company with no guarantee of survival. He has spoken openly about his battles with depression and social anxiety, not in the sanitized, brand-safe way that celebrities sometimes deploy vulnerability as a PR tool, but in the raw, specific, unflinching way of someone who has genuinely sat inside the darkest rooms of their own mind and decided to talk about it honestly, because the honesty might help someone else find their way out. All of that, every bit of that struggle and pain and rejection and persistence went directly into the music, into the production, into the lyrics. Suga's work under his solo alias Agus D is, by the assessment of critics who have no particular investment in BTS's commercial success, some of the most emotionally honest and musically sophisticated work in contemporary hip-hop, regardless of language, regardless of geography, regardless of genre classification. His mixtapes don't sound like idol music. They sound like a person excavating themselves in real time and leaving the recordings as evidence. And his production work for BTS, the sonic architecture he has contributed to albums like Wings and Map of the Soul, demonstrates a compositional intelligence that operates on a completely different level from standard K-pop production, drawing on jazz theory, classical structure, and a knowledge of music history that rivals formally trained composers. So when Pharrell Williams, the man who heard 20% of all American radio in his head simultaneously, sat across from Min Yoongi and actually listened to what Suga was doing creatively, the reaction was not what anyone expected from someone of Pharrell's stature and composure. Pharrell went still. And then Pharrell started asking questions, real questions, the kind that don't come from someone performing interest for a camera or an industry event or a promotional context, the kind that come from someone who has genuinely encountered something they want to understand more completely, whose creative radar has fired in a way it doesn't fire anymore, and who needs to follow that signal wherever it leads. He asked about process, he asked about influences, he asked about the specific decisions behind specific sounds. And Suga, who is famously, almost legendarily reserved in social situations, who does not perform warmth he doesn't feel, or enthusiasm he genuinely possesses, opened up. Because there are very few people on earth qualified to have that conversation with Min Yoongi at the level it deserves to be had, and Pharrell Williams is unambiguously one of them. What unfolded between them was described by everyone present as one of those rare, almost sacred creative conversations when two people who both speak the deepest language of music find themselves in the same room at the same time with nowhere else to be. The age gap disappeared. The cultural gap disappeared. The language gap. Suga's English is functional but not fluent. Pharrell speaks no Korean. Somehow, astonishingly, barely mattered because the conversation kept finding ways to happen anyway, through music references and production terminology and the universal shorthand of people who have spent their entire lives inside sound. But the moment that defined this entry, the moment that secured its position not just at the top of this list, but in the permanent cultural memory of everyone who witnessed or heard about it, was the moment when Pharrell Williams, unprompted, publicly, with zero industry calculation or career incentive, described Suga as a genius. Not talented, not impressive, not a great artist, a genius. That word from that person in that context.
Pharrell Williams, who has worked with Jay-Z and Beyoncé and Kendrick Lamar and Daft Punk, who has spent 30 years surrounded by the most talented people in music, whose threshold for what constitutes extraordinary has been raised by decades of proximity to the genuinely exceptional, chose the word genius for Min Yoongi. And then he elaborated. He talked about the construction of Suga's music. He talked about the emotional depth embedded in the production choices. He talked about recognizing in Suga's work a quality that he described as transcendent, a word Pharrell Williams does not use casually, a word that carries the full weight of 30 years of creative authority behind it. The internet predictably erupted. Armies already knew what Suga was, but hearing it said by Pharrell Williams in those specific terms, with that specific weight, felt like a formal coronation from the music world's most credentialed voice. And for Suga himself, the kid from Daegu that delivered food on a bicycle to buy recording equipment, who was told his music wasn't viable, who spent years fighting for space in an industry that didn't know what to do with him, that moment of recognition from Pharrell Williams represented something that no chart position, no award, no streaming record